Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today we're diving headfirst into a book that really shook things up for a lot of people regarding work, life, ambition.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of a blueprint for living life on your own terms, like right now, not waiting for retirement, way down the line.
Yeah.
We're talking Timothy Ferriss's The 4-Hour Workweek.
Absolutely. This whole deep dive is basically about ditching that standard 9-to-5 grind.
Right.
And figuring out how to build, a luxury lifestyle now using what Ferriss calls the currency of the new rich.
Yeah.
Time and mobility. Freedom, essentially. We've got tons of insights, some pretty surprising real-world examples, too, showing how you might just bend reality a bit.
Yeah, we've got a stack of fascinating stuff in the book here. Everything from, outsourcing parts of your life to mastering the art of, not working so much.
Mm-hmm.
Our mission, same as always, is to pull out the really important bits, the key insights from all this material. So you walk away feeling informed, maybe inspired, but not, totally overloaded. So this idea of being new rich, what does that actually mean? Ferriss sort of flips the script on wealth.
He does. It's not just about having a big bank account. It's having ultimate control over your time and where you are. Freedom, basically. Freedom to do what you want, when you want, wherever.
Okay, so let's get into how he suggests actually achieving that. And Ferriss himself, he was kind of the perfect example of someone who needed this change, wasn't he?
Totally. He talks about going from, 14-hour days, making maybe $40,000 a year.
Which sounds exhausting.
Right.
Yeah.
To working just 4 hours a week and earning over $40,000 a month. It sounds nuts.
It really does.
But his argument is that a lot of the common sense rules we live by are, maybe not as solid as we think. They're kind of fragile illusions.
And what's really interesting here is how he just takes traditional success and turns it on its head.
Yeah, it wasn't just about the money for him. It was freedom he was after. He tells that story about being at the Tango World Championship semifinals.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And realizing, wow, I'm only here doing this amazing thing because I quit that crazy demanding job.
So that highlights his whole point. True wealth is time and mobility, not just stacking cash.
Exactly.
That whole mini retirement idea is so different. We're trained to save up all our time off for the end.
Yeah.
But for listeners who are thinking, yeah, but I can't just leave my job, how does he deal with those practical fears, the career stuff?
He definitely tackles those fears. He starts by making you question basic assumptions. What if retirement just wasn't the goal? How does that change your choices today? Or do you really need to work like crazy to live like a millionaire? And these mini retirements, they're not about just running away. They're about spreading out rest and enjoyment through your whole life.
Instead of hoarding it all for the end.
Right. Not just waiting until you're too old to enjoy it, maybe.
And you mentioned defining rich. He makes this really key distinction, doesn't he, between different types of income?
He does. It's crucial. He contrasts absolute income, that's just the raw dollar amount you make.
Okay. With relative income. So think about it. Someone making $50K a year, working 10 hours a week.
Right.
They're way richer in terms of time and freedom than someone making the same $50K but grinding out 80 hours a week.
That makes sense. It's about what your time is actually worth, what it lets you do.
Exactly. Valuing your time beyond just that hourly wage.
And there's that story of Hans, the lawyer. He goes on vacation.
Yeah, to Brazil. And he gets this taste of freedom and suddenly realizes, hey, taking risks isn't actually as terrifying as I thought.
So what happened?
He ends up starting a surf adventure company, finds his dream life, peace. And he apparently tells overworked people all the time, you can do this. It's not failure to pause your current track.
It's a choice, a deliberate one.
Exactly.
Okay, so you redefine success. Then what? How do you actually start making changes? Ferriss gets pretty hardcore with his next step, right? This radical elimination.
Oh, yeah. It's pretty intense. He famously starts with what he calls a low-information diet.
Which sounds kind of scary in today's world. It does. He admits he barely watches the news, bought one newspaper in 5 years, checks business email maybe an hour a week total.
So how does he not, live under a rock?
He relies on trusted friends for the important stuff, uses very specific targeted info sources, basically lets other people filter and synthesize for him.
Okay.
And this whole elimination idea, it really hinges on two big concepts working together, the 80-20 principle and Parkinson's law.
Right, the 80-20 principle. Most people have heard of it, 80% of your results from 20% of your effort. How did Ferriss use that specifically?
He applied it really ruthlessly to his own business. He looked at his customers, all 120 of them, and found that just 5 were bringing in 95% of the revenue.
Wow, only 5?
Yeah. So he focused all his energy on those 5, basically put the rest on autopilot or let them go. And his income doubled, went from 30K to 60K a month, while his work hours crashed from 80 plus down to just 15 a week.
That is mind-blowing, that kind of focus.
It really shows the power of cutting out the noise.
And then you add Parkinson's law into that mix. The idea that work expands to fill the time you give it.
Exactly. That's the other side of the coin. You identify the vital few tasks with 80-20.
Right.
And then you give yourself ridiculously short deadlines to force focus, using Parkinson's law. Give yourself a week. The task seems huge. Give yourself a day.
You just get the essentials done, no fluff.
Precisely. Identify the critical, then compress the time.
He tells that story about the tech salesman, Charney.
Yeah, compelling example. Charney uses these tactics, goes from 40 hours a week down to 18.
Less than half.
And produces 4 times the results. Plus, gets 2 extra hours a day with his family and takes Mondays and Fridays off.
How? It sounds like magic.
No magic, just asking really tough questions like Ferris suggests. If you had a heart attack, could only work 2 hours a week, what would you absolutely have to do?
Oof. That forces clarity.
Or, gun to your head, you have to drop 80% of your activities. What goes? It forces you to be brutal about what actually matters versus what just feels busy.
It's about ruthless honesty with yourself.
Absolutely.
He even has that comfort challenge for the reader, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm. Say no to everything for 2 days straight. Just to practice.
Just get used to refusing things.
Yeah. His point is, you only have the rights you're willing to fight for, to defend. Setting boundaries is key.
Okay, so define, eliminate. What's next? Automation. That sounds like the dream.
It is, kind of. The idea is to build a muse, as he calls it. A business that makes money with very little day-to-day management from you.
Right. Not needing a huge team or being there all the time. He has that funny quote about the factory of the future.
Ha! Yeah. Only 2 employees, a man and a dog. The man's there to feed the dog.
And the dog's there to keep the man from touching the equipment.
Exactly. It's about systems that run themselves.
And a huge part of that is outsourcing.
A massive part. A.J. Jacobs, the Esquire editor, took this to an extreme. Outsourced business tasks to assistants in India, personal errands to a concierge.
Didn't he even try to outsource an argument with his wife?
He did, which, maybe not the best application.
Probably not. But it definitely illustrates the principle, how much can you delegate? The goal is to become the ghost in the machine. The business runs without you being the main operator.
And another really powerful idea he brings in here is geo-arbitrage.
Leveraging different costs of living around the world.
Exactly. He argues that if you free up your time and location, your money suddenly stretches way further, maybe 3-10 times as much, depending on where you go.
Talks about living like royalty, private planes, amazing wine, all for less than U.S. rent. That's tempting.
It's a strong motivator.
But how do you set up automation without becoming the main point of failure yourself? The person everyone has to check with.
That's the critical step. Removing yourself is the bottleneck. He learned this the hard way with his own company, Brain Quicken. They were drowning in customer service emails, like 200 a day.
Ouch.
So what did he do? He empowered his outsourced team, told them, look, if it's under $100, just fix it. You don't need my permission.
And what happened?
Emails dropped to fewer than 20 a week. Profits went up, returns went down. His takeaway: give people responsibility and trust, and suddenly they get a whole lot smarter.
It's amazing how often that works. And his process for actually building one of these Muse businesses sounds incredibly methodical.
It is. Very step-by-step. Pick a niche you can reach affordably. Aim for a high markup, like 8-10x.
Okay.
Choose products easy to manufacture, maybe 3-4 weeks max. And crucially, test the idea first. Use cheap online ads to see if people actually want it before you invest heavily.
So you minimize risk and time up front, design it to be automated from the start.
That's the idea. Maximum leverage, minimum ongoing effort.
Okay, so that covers building your own thing. But what if you're an employee? The final step is liberation, escaping the office. That sounds like the hardest part for many.
It definitely sounds daunting, but Ferris frames it as moving from needing to be present to proving your performance, showing you can deliver results from anywhere.
He tells that story about Dave Camaril.
Right, a longtime employee. Spends a whole month in China, doesn't tell anyone he's gone.
And his boss was okay with it?
Apparently.
Oh.
Because the work got done. Performance trumped presence.
So how do you actually negotiate that if you're say, stuck in a traditional office job?
The book lays out a strategy. It involves things like making the company invest more in your training so you're more valuable, documenting all your processes meticulously.
Making yourself replaceable, in a way?
Sort of, but more like making your function easy to understand and manage remotely, and then subtly proving you're productive even when you're not physically there. Maybe start with 1 day remote, then 2.
Like that Sherwood example, the guy who used instant messenger.
Exactly. He made himself primarily reachable online, so people just stopped looking for him at his desk, even when he was literally thousands of miles away. Perception management.
It's about changing expectations. And once you are liberated, then what? Back to the mini retirements.
Yes, but not like a typical frantic vacation. He talks about binge travel being stressful.
Yeah, trying to cram everything in.
Instead, a mini retirement is relocating somewhere for, say, 1 to 6 months, really settling in. It's less an escape, more a chance to, like, re-examine your life, experience things deeply.
At a slower pace.
Right. He gives that example of Julie and Mark sailing around the world for 15 months with 3 young kids.
And the cost was surprisingly low, wasn't it?
Ridiculously low, like $18,000 or $19,000 total, less than their rent would have been in Paris.
That just blows up the idea that you need to be super wealthy for long-term travel. But kids, that's often the reason people say they can't do this.
Ferris tackles that excuse too. He shares the story of Robin Malinsky Rummel traveling through South America for a year with her 7-year-old.
How'd they manage?
Simple things. Taking language classes right away to integrate. Even a virtual cash system to reward good behavior. It was enriching, not just possible.
And again, the finances often work out better than expected. Living well abroad can be cheaper than just getting by at home.
Especially if you do arbitrage, yeah. Even in places like Europe sometimes.
Okay, underlying all these tactics deal. Define, eliminate, automate, liberate. There's a definite mindset required, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. A huge mindset shift. Ferris constantly says things like, everything popular is wrong.
Challenge the status quo.
Right, like how he won that kickboxing championship, not by being the best fighter,
but by finding a loophole in the rules.
Yeah.
Exploiting a technicality. It's about thinking differently.
And a key tool for that mindset shift is fear setting.
Okay, what's fear setting?
It's the opposite of goal setting. Instead of dreaming about the best outcome, you meticulously define your nightmare. What's the absolute worst thing that could happen if you made this big change you're scared of?
And how does that help?
He uses his own story. Making $70 a month, but totally miserable. He sat down and listed his worst fears if he quit. You know, what would happen.
Yeah.
He realized, okay, worst case, maybe I'd have to crash on a friend's couch, get a temporary bartending job, sell some stuff. It wouldn't be the end of the world. It wouldn't be that hard to recover.
So it cuts through that vague, paralyzing anxiety, makes the fear concrete and often smaller.
Exactly. It often shows you your fears are overblown or you have ways to mitigate them.
And he argues that fear often disguises itself as optimism, right? Like, well, things will get better if I just wait.
Yeah, that tempting hallucination that your current, maybe unsatisfying situation will just magically improve without any big changes.
He also talks about a choice minimal lifestyle. That sounds counterintuitive. Do we want more choices?
We think we do. But he argues that having too many options actually drains your attention, makes you less productive, and even makes you appreciate what you have less.
Analysis paralysis.
Pretty much. So he suggests setting rules for yourself to automate decisions and embracing a not-to-do list.
A list of things not to do.
Yeah, like consciously deciding not to check email constantly or not to carry your phone 24/7, eliminating unproductive habits.
It's about protecting your time and focus.
Stop letting work just expand to fill the void where, life and relationships should be. Schedule your life first, then fit work around it. Defend that schedule.
Like the Star Wars dad story.
Yeah. His daughter tells the teacher, my dad just sits around and watches Star Wars all day.
Which wasn't literally true.
No. It just meant he had structured his life so he could do whatever he wanted, basically. He had the time to actually be present with his family.
Okay, we've covered the principles, the deal framework, but the book is also packed with real stories. What do these new rich lives actually look like?
They're really diverse. There's the musician who read the book and just wiped the slate clean, made tabula rasa.
Started fresh.
Yeah. Outsourced photo editing, mailing lists, started testing some Muse ideas like an online music licensing platform. Now he feels in control, has more time, even helped his wife start a cafe.
Then there's the Art Lovers Wanted case. Someone totally burned out.
Right. Unfulfilling job, working crazy hours. Found the book, focused on the deal steps, especially dreamlining, elimination, liberation.
And the result?
Got remote work approved, slashed hours from 9+ a day down to just 4 a week. Got a $10K raise somehow, and now has tons of time for music, theater, fitness. Their whole reality shifted.
It shows it's possible even within a traditional job structure sometimes.
Definitely. We also see the virtual lawyer who moved to Cali, Colombia.
Geo-arbitrage in action.
Big time, beautiful apartment, full-time maid and cook, costing less than $40 a week. Runs his U.S. law practice virtually, calls forward, mail scanned online, completely location independent.
And the financial banker fell asleep driving.
Yeah, total workup call, revamped everything, started a blog, consulting, then launched an automated guide for investment banking interviews.
That worked out.
Tripled his income while cutting his hours by like 6 to 9 times. Full mobility.
Wow.
And finally, the 4-hour family. They really embraced the digital nomad life.
Combining travel with family life.
Exactly. Mini retirements, but integrating schooling and volunteering locally. Had their daughter in a local school in Spain learning flamenco.
Still doing piano lessons via Skype with her teacher back home.
Right. It shows you can create these amazing, rich educational experiences outside the conventional box. Family doesn't have to mean being tied down.
So when you boil it all down, what's the core message here?
I think it's really about challenging everything you assume about work, about time, about how life should be lived.
Yeah, having the guts to actually define what you want your life to look like.
And then being ruthless about cutting out the stuff that doesn't serve that vision, automating your income streams strategically.
And finally, liberating yourself, getting free from the constraints of geography and the 9-to-5 schedule.
It's recognizing that, maybe happiness isn't about constantly chasing more. It's about consciously designing a life that actually works for you, balancing productivity with real fulfillment.
There's that quote from the book, "The miracle is not to walk on water."
The miracle is to walk on the green earth, dwelling deeply in the present moment and feeling truly alive. It's about being present now.
And maybe the biggest takeaway, the most challenging thought for listeners is, don't save it all for the end.
That dream trip. Learning that language, pursuing that passion.
Chances are, Ferris argues, you could start doing some version of it now, not someday. He points out a round-the-world trip can cost surprisingly little.
Yeah, like under $1,400 sometimes for the basic ticket. And he suggests other books too, like The Magic of Thinking Big. Tools to expand your thinking.
Because the underlying truth is, as he puts it, life is too short to be small.
You've got the ideas now, the tools, some inspiration hopefully from this deep dive. The real question is, what are you going to do with it? What could your newfound freedom look like?
A great question to ponder. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and definitely keep asking those big questions.